Who is Jesus to you? Our image of God dictates how we live, and today's gospel illustrates this very well for us. Let's start by grounding ourselves with where we are in this story. We should remind ourselves that this gospel is the last of three revelations, all of which took place on a single day. It's the day we call Easter. In fact, the other two revelations build up to today's climax. So when we start with the first revelation, it is when the women went to the tomb to care for Jesus' body. When they arrived, he was not there. The two figures appeared to the women and reminded them that Jesus had said that he would rise from the dead on the third day. He's not dead, he's risen. Then the women remembered all the things that Jesus had taught them about what would happen to him. And they went and told the disciples what they saw, heard, and what they knew. The disciples didn't believe the women. They thought it was just nonsense. Why didn't they remember what Jesus had said like the women did? Why didn't it click for them? This tells us something about what the disciples believed about Jesus and how they saw him. Did they not think he would rise from the dead? Did they not see him as divine? This will color the rest of our story. The second revelation happened later that day. Two men are walking on the road to Emmaus. Jesus comes and starts to walk with them. The men are talking about everything that's happened in the last week, and Jesus joins in this conversation. The two men start to tell Jesus all that has happened to Jesus. He's confounded. So he starts to talk to them about all the prophecies that he has fulfilled. But the two guys, they just don't get it. They're engaged in the conversation, but they don't see Jesus. They stop for lunch, ask Jesus to join them. He does, he joins them, and then he breaks bread. And then all of a sudden, the men realize that this is Jesus. And just like that, he disappears. They immediately go to Jerusalem to tell the disciples what has happened. And this is where our story starts today. The two men arrive in the upper room. We don't know how many people are there. We were told they're with the disciples and the rest. So I would guess it's maybe about 20 people. We have 10 disciples because Thomas isn't there and Judas isn't there. We have the two men and the rest. So 20, 25 people. And you can just hear the buzz that's in this room, right? Everyone talking all at once, trying to make sense of everything that's happened today. Do you believe this? I mean, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? Could it possibly be? Maybe the women weren't crazy. So there's a whole sermon in that last statement, and I hope one day to be able to preach it. But today, we're going to stay with everyone trying to figure it out. So Jesus appears, and no one notices. Jesus says, "Peace be with you," and the room falls silent. You know how when you're talking about someone else, even if it's good, and they walk in the room, that awkward hush, sort of sense of surprise that fills the room? We'll multiply that over and over, and maybe you start to approach or capture a bit of what this moment might have felt like. Even after hearing about the two revelations that had happened earlier in the day, they were frightened and they were startled. Why? I want them to respond by running to Jesus and hugging him, but they respond in fear and uncertainty. But Jesus responds. He wants to show them that he is there with them. It is really him. He doesn't scold them and say, "Don't you know who I am? Why don't you believe?" Instead, he invites them to experience him with their senses. Look at my hands and feet. Touch me. See who I am. He answers the unasked question, "I am not a ghost. Can you touch a ghost?" And Jesus goes further. He desires to settle their doubts, and he asks for a piece of fish to eat. He does this because it shows that his physical existence is real. It shows that the real world is as real to the resurrected Christ as it is to us. One commentator said that when the resurrected Messiah eats, it implies that the resurrection works out its meaning in the real world, not in heaven. This is powerful. The resurrected Christ engages with us in the earthly, physical world. This story anchors the resurrection in the real world. Real people eat, Jesus eats. This means that the Christian faith is not some abstract thing that doesn't really matter until we get to heaven. The resurrected Christ does not take away all of the earthly problems of his followers and take them straight to heaven. He joins us in our everyday activities. He eats just like we eat. This matters to us today. Our faith is not some abstract thing that simply waits for heaven. It's grounded in a God who walks with us here and is with us in tangible ways. Jesus is with us when our loved one is sick, when we are lonely, or when we have lost a loved one. When the disciples believed, they had a new image of Jesus as the resurrected Messiah. It changed how they lived. Just as he had been transformed and resurrected, they were also changed in a way that would change the rest of their lives and the history of the world. They told this story over and over. They taught people. 2,000 years later, the story of Jesus, the experience of Jesus, is all over the world. This is the point of the resurrection, new life. Those who follow Christ are marked by their tangible experience with Jesus. When we know Jesus beyond a storybook character and as a living and breathing companion, that is when we can truly reflect the image of the risen Christ. Jesus meant what he said about the resurrection, which means he probably means what he said about how we are supposed to treat others. When we know Jesus as someone who cares about our world and walks with us, we stand with Black Lives Matter. We lift up trans people. We feed the hungry. We visit the lonely, sit with the brokenhearted. Our whole life is changed, and Jesus can change our world through us. I want to share an icon with you. I meditate on this icon often as a way to help me see Jesus. This icon is called Jesus and the Friend. What I like about it is that Jesus is walking next to the friend. He is there with him. He has his hand resting on his shoulder. Jesus' cloak reaches around the friend, maybe comforting or protecting him, but at the very least covering him. When I look at this, I see that Jesus looks where the friend looks. He's interested in what interests the friend. They are both holy. This is what happens when we are in the presence of God. There's more to this icon. I invite you to take some time this week, light a candle, sit with the icon, and just look at it. What do you see? What does it tell you about Jesus? It might help answer this question. Okay, you can take that. So, who is Jesus to you? He is here with us when things are hard, when we are scared. He is here, the friend with us. He reaches us and tells us to touch him. He grounds us in our senses. Look, see, touch, listen. I am here. I am with you. I bring peace to you. And now that you have seen and know, go be my witness.